Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you could join us tonight. My name is Mackenzie Dyer, and I am a program specialist with the Professional Educator Standards Board. And I am joined by my colleagues, Matt and Projecta, who will be helping and answering questions in the chat. I'm also joined by our presenter, Bonnie McDaniel, who I will introduce more thoroughly in a couple of minutes. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. During this session, as I mentioned before, there were 300 people registered, and I know more people wanted to join tonight. So I'm very sorry that we could only have 300 people join. That being said, there are a lot of people with us today, so please remain muted so that we are able to hear the professional learning from Dr. Bonnie McDaniel. We will have time for questions and answers during the presentation. So if you have questions about the presentation and the professional learning, please save those for the for when we get to the question and answer period, and you will know when we get there. PESB will also provide clock hour information and answer questions at the end of the session. So any clock hour information, or if you need the link for PD Enroller, anything like that, please hold those questions for the very end of our session together tonight, and we will be sure to answer those questions. We also wanted to let you know that this session tonight is being recorded, so you can view it later and share it with your colleagues later as well. All right, before we get started with SEL learning, I wanted to introduce the Professional Educator Standards Board. So our board is a state agency that is tasked with ensuring that Washington's educator workforce is composed of equity-minded professional educators who meet the diverse needs of students and schools and communities in our state. So we're comprised of two boards. We have the Professional Educator Standards Board, as well as the Paraeducator Board, which recognize that the high standards for all educators are essential to student success and achievement. So on this slide also is our mission, vision, and values that you can read. Next slide.
Right. And before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge that no matter where each of us are physically today, we are all on the traditional lands of Native Americans whose ancestors were the original inhabitants of Washington and all of America. So as we proceed with our work, let's make sure that our deliberations and recommendations benefit their descendants equitably. Well, we'd also like to offer a moment of silence before we get going. We'd like to acknowledge that this history of this nation is one that's fraught with contradictions for too long. This country has elevated a story of democracy and freedom while minimizing the impact of violence and oppression on marginalized communities on whose backs this nation was built. Today, members of our Black and Asian communities and other communities of color continue to experience racism through police brutality, mass incarceration, inequitable education and health services, deportation, and other forms of subjugation. We aim to disrupt this legacy of systemic racism by centering racial equity and justice in our work. This is how we stand with our communities of color. So before we get going, maybe just take a moment of silence here to consider these words and how you can join in this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce our facilitator today. Please meet Dr. Bonnie McDaniel, who is the founder and executive director of Emotion Wise Coaching LLC. She's a current member of OSPI's SEL Advisory Committee and representing the Washington PTA. Bonnie was instrumental in developing Washington's SEL implementation briefs for teacher and principal preparation programs. She also participated in the work group that developed Washington State's SEL standards, benchmarks, and indicators, and Washington State's SEL implementation guide for educators. Bonnie has previously taught social and cultural foundation classes in educator preparation and now facilitates parenting for emotional well-being courses through the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Bonnie McDaniel, and we will start our professional learning tonight.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction, Mackenzie. It is really good to be here with you all today. I appreciate you all making time in your busy schedules for the workshop. I know this can be kind of a rough time to focus on a workshop, so I want to invite you all to take a few deep breaths with me here to arrive in this space together. Maybe stretch a little bit. Notice where you might be feeling some tension. Let that go with an exhale. You might have some other things on your mind right now, so I invite you to set those things aside. Maybe imagine setting them down on the floor next to you where they'll be waiting for you after our time together today, so that you can be present with us here today. It's my belief that one of the most precious gifts that we can give to each other is the gift of our attention and presence. Not only is that a precious gift, it can be a rare gift because we live in a world of constant distractions. And so sometimes being present isn't easy, but that's my invitation to you today. Our topic today is self-awareness, turning the lens inward with compassion. And I want to say right away that I know already that you are brave souls for showing up. Turning inward can feel a little bit scary, particularly in a space like this. So why would we be creating a space like this to do this work, to turn the lens inward with compassion? You all have your own reasons for showing up here today. There's something here maybe that you're curious about, something that you think might be of value to you personally in exploring this topic. And so I want to share with you an example of how this work has been helpful to me personally. So I've engaged in these self-awareness practices for a little while now, and I've become a little bit more familiar with my own thoughts and feelings and sensations. How that shows up for me is when I'm interacting with other people, I am a little bit better at keeping a dual focus. So out there and also in here, what's going on with me. I can notice, for example, my own discomfort a little bit better. And I feel a little bit less of an impulse to make my own discomfort go away by trying to manage other people's behavior, maybe by jumping in to try to solve their problem or even moving away from them, either emotionally or physically. So this awareness that I've been working on has given me a little bit more choice about how I can react. I can notice what's going on for me, maybe recognize some warning signals, and take a pause and ask a question. Like, what's a helpful way to respond in this situation right now? I could even check in with my values, which I try to do, and my idea of who I want to be as a teacher, as a coach, and shoot for that, especially in difficult situations. So that's just a little bit about how this has been directly helpful to me personally. And so I'm here because I'm hopeful that there's something in here for you, and maybe this can be helpful for you as well. So I want you to just take a second here to think about your own why. Do you have questions, or what are you concerned about, hopes, and notice what comes up for you. So let's go ahead and jump into this topic, this big topic of self-awareness. And I want to do that in a little bit of a different way. So a typical way might be to start off with the dictionary definition, but the dictionary isn't quite up to the task of capturing some really important aspects of self-awareness. So instead, I want to start off with a poem. And you've got that up there. I think I'm going to go ahead and switch over to sharing my screen, if I can do that. There, how was that? That work? All right. So some of you may be familiar with this poem. I'm going to read it out loud. And as I do, what I want to invite you to do is to try to keep that dual focus, both on the words and the meanings of the poem itself, and also on what comes up for you. So what thoughts, feelings, or sensations, or memories do the words evoke? And that this isn't easy to do, to keep this dual focus. So you end up toggling back and forth between the poem and your experience. You might even get lost in your own experience a little bit, and that is completely okay. So the goal here is just to be open and curious about whatever comes up. So settle in and let's give this a try. This is The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearm and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Okay, let that sink in for a little bit. And I invite you to notice what came up for you as I read the poem. Were you able to track the words? Did your attention kind of go back and forth? Did you get any clear images, any memories that came up for you? Did anybody notice maybe feeling now a little uneasy, being asked to focus on your inner experience? Like we're breaking some kind of unspoken rule that says our personal experience, especially our inner experience, has no place in a class setting. I certainly have felt some of that. We are all shaped by the culture that we grow up in. And the culture that I grew up in, the school culture in particular, taught me that the part of me that mattered the most in school was my capacity for reason and logic. That was the part of me that was recognized, instructed, and evaluated. And that cultural belief that reason is what makes us important and unique as human beings, that it's impersonal, and that it operates best when it's separate from our emotional lives, from the body, and from social context, is, I believe, deeply embedded in Western and Westernized cultures. This image that you see is of a painting called The School of Athens. It was painted by Raphael in the 16th century, I believe, and it hangs in the Vatican. And Plato is the guy in the middle with the beard pointing up in this photo. When I used to teach philosophy of education classes to teacher candidates, sometimes we would start by reading Plato, who elaborated this view of reason as something that is impersonal and detached. which has been enormously influential, in my view, in the Western tradition of philosophy and of schooling. This is not just an academic standpoint. There are political consequences to this understanding about reason too. Plato claimed that those who were the most capable of exercising reason in this detached and impersonal way were the ones qualified to rule in his ideal state. This understanding of reason has been criticized from a variety of standpoints for the harm it has done. In the last 20 or so years, it's been challenged by the fields of psychology and neuroscience. The message is that from a scientific standpoint, this isn't how reason works. It's not something that operates separately from emotion, from the body, and from social context. Our capacity for reasoning is actually deeply intertwined with emotion. Effective neuroscientist Mary Helen Immordino-Yang says, "It is neurobiologically impossible to build memories, to engage complex thoughts, and to make meaningful decisions without emotions." The way I understand how this works is something like this. So when we are thinking about something, our feelings and our emotions are engaged in evoking relevant information from the past, helping us understand what's at stake for me here in this problem. What were the outcomes the last time I tried something similar? Should I keep working on this or stop? And this steady stream of emotional information and feedback help guide thought down productive pathways as we think through a problem in the present. This is why Immordino-Yang suggests that we think of emotions not as something that interfere with our thinking, but as the quote here says, as the rudder that steers thinking. Or as her mentor, neuroscientist Antonio Damasio puts it, affect is not just necessary for wisdom. It's also irrevocably woven into the fabric of every decision. So if it doesn't really make sense to think about reason as something that's completely separate from emotion, it's also not consistent with our understanding of how the brain works to think of reason as something that happens separate from social context. If it's true, as Immordino-Yang puts it, that we learn about things that we care about, our brains evolved to care about our social relationships. They evolved to survive and to thrive within the context of social systems. And teachers have an intuitive understanding of this. They know that the relationships that they have with their students and that the students have with their peers and their family all have a lot to do with the student's sense of themselves as learners, their motivation to learn, and to persevere in the face of challenges. So it's one thing to observe that this is true, and it's another thing to really start to imagine how our institutions and our practices in education could change and maybe should change to really reflect these understandings. Here's Immordino-Yang one more time. She says, no longer can we think of learning as separate from or disrupted by emotion, and no longer can we focus only at the level of the individual student in analyzing good strategies for classroom instruction. Students and teachers are socially interacting and learning from each other in ways that can't be done justice by examining only the cold cognitive aspects of academic skills. Like other forms of learning and interacting, building academic knowledge involves integrating emotional and cognition in social context. So if the challenge is to think of reason and of learning in this interconnected way, then the challenge may also be to start to see ourselves and our students in a more holistic way as well. One of the things that we can do, I believe, is we can start to center our practices around the idea of ourselves and our students as whole people with minds, yes, but also emotions, shaped by social context and relationships, with unique ways of seeing and experiencing the world, and with unique aspirations for the future. once we start to really see people, both children and adults, in their complexity in this way, we can start to ask, how can we help individuals to understand, to manage, and to guide their emotions and their inner experience and navigate the complex world of social relationships so that they can reach their academic potential and lead emotionally healthy and fulfilling lives? This is where I believe that cultivating self-awareness comes in. By engaging in a practice of monitoring our inner experience, we can learn to modify, regulate that experience in ways that support learning and that help us reach our goals and fulfill our potential. So there's a lot of research that's coming in about the many benefits of cultivating self-awareness. Some of this has been done with folks who have cultivated an established meditation practice. In Dr. Dan Siegel, who's a professor of psychiatry at UCLA, identifies some of these benefits, and I invite you to become familiar with some of this research. He talks about benefits, improved immune function to fight infection. So these benefits are in health as well as well-being, improved cardiovascular health. It's even been shown to optimize the enzymes that repair the end of chromosomes that keep your cells young and healthy, and enhance our ability to weather the storms of life, to direct and sustain our attention, even to increase our sense of connection to others, to feel empathy and an enhanced sense of meaning and purpose. So those are some of the general benefits that cultivating self-awareness practice can bring. For educators in particular, I think cultivating self-awareness can have specific benefits. And some of those, first of all, the first thing I think of is just cultivating this sense of well-being and resilience in the face of the heavy emotional and social demands of teaching, and particularly now, the teachers that I work with, I feel what is going on, and so many are struggling, and kids are having a hard time post-pandemic. And so cultivating that sense of resilience for teachers, understanding their own emotions, maybe developing in some cases a little more kindness and compassion toward themselves, helping them to maintain emotional boundaries, which can allow them to show up with compassion for their students. So teachers have an enormous effect on developing children. And so by cultivating this self-awareness practices, it influences how we can show up for them. If we can cultivate what's been called a calm, non-anxious presence, that can have an outsized influence on developing kids. And since teachers relate to so many of them, the impact is just enormous. You may be familiar with this. This kind of goes without saying, but I'll point it out anyways. The best way to teach SEL is to model it. So if you've cultivated a practice and you're living those practices, then you're in a position to be able to authentically model it for kids. And that's going to be a better way for your kids to learn social and emotional learning in the classroom. And the last thing I want to mention here is the capacity to interrupt cultural bias. So this sometimes gets overlooked, but I think it can be an important consideration. We live in a culture of beliefs and thoughts and emotions that are shaped by that culture, which means that we may have internalized some harmful beliefs and feelings towards groups of people. And those beliefs and feelings can influence the ways that we respond, sometimes without our awareness. So given that sometimes we're not aware of our emotional responses, they can lead us to move toward someone or move away from someone, and we're not necessarily aware of that. But as we cultivate self-awareness, we can become more aware of those feelings, which gives that opportunity, as I mentioned before, of choice in how to respond. And so you can be able to notice the feeling and then pause and then call up some idea of who you are as an educator, who you're trying to be, and notice that it's not consistent. And so instead of leaning away, maybe you have a choice now to lean into a situation. So a question that I think can come up at this point is like, how could this be? How could this act of just paying attention to our inner experience lead to such powerful benefits, health benefits and well-being benefits? And so I just want to give a little sketch here of how we can think about this process of cultivating awareness. And here I'm going to draw again on Dan Siegel's work. He has this metaphor that he calls the wheel of awareness, which I think is just a helpful way of thinking about what we're doing as we're cultivating self-awareness. So what I want to point out here in this wheel is in the center is the knowing of awareness itself, which he describes as the felt texture of the present moment as it unfolds. So it is this sense of knowing that we all share. We know, right? We can feel the present as it is unfolding. And so that is represented by the hub. And then along the outside, all along the rim of the wheel, you have the things that can be known. So you can know about your own thoughts or feelings or sensations. And all of those things that can be known are along the outside of the wheel on the rim. And then what connects the two is attention. So it is our ability to pay attention, direct our attention from one element to the next that connects what can be known and brings it into awareness. So I think it's kind of it's a helpful way of thinking about what we're doing as you practice. Then you are intentionally moving it around the rim. It's a little bit like strengthening a muscle. So you get better at directing it as you develop the sense that it's, and you develop the sense that it's you who is directing it. So instead of getting stuck, for example, on a spot on the rim, like feeling like you're just overwhelmed by a particular feeling, you can start to develop a sense of differentiation. Well, here's that feeling, but I am not that feeling. And that can give you a sense of agency and that capacity to take care of yourself in that moment, make a choice to maybe do something to alleviate that feeling if it's uncomfortable. So that's just a quick sketch, a way to think about it. Lots to maybe ponder and play around with there. I would say another benefit or another reason why this practice can have such beneficial effects is that we tend to live in a culture that values thought over feeling. That may be really fairly safe to say, at least the dominant culture. We tend to live in our heads and we can actually lose touch with the felt sense of our immediate experience. And so by focusing awareness on that and bring our sensations into awareness, it can actually just help us connect with what makes us feel vital and alive. And so that can, I think, be part of the boost to well-being that a mindfulness practice can bring as well. So if there's all these benefits to doing this, why?
Bonnie, I
Yes.
have to pause you for a second. I'm so sorry.
No.
The left side of the slides are cut off a little bit.
Oh, let's see. Is
There we go.
that
Perfect.
better?
Mhm.
Can you see, is it filling up
Thank
the whole
you.
screen?
Yes, it's filling up the whole screen now. Yes,
Okay.
just noticed in the last one when the wheel was cut off a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for interrupting me and letting me know.
You're good.
Okay. All right. So what are some of the challenges? So the first one that I want to talk about is this stance of being both receptive and attentive at the same time is unfamiliar. It's not something that we are in the habit of doing. And indeed, paying attention to our inner experience can be really challenging. The signals that we get can be subtle. We're very much used to focusing our attention out there in the world. And so just trying to pick up those signals can be difficult. And it involves being attentive, but also receptive at the same time to what is happening in the moment, instead of focusing on, what our expectations are in that moment. To just really be open to the actual experience can be difficult. And of course, our minds can wander, and that can feel frustrating. The second thing, a significant challenge, I think, is that it can bring feelings of discomfort. One of my teachers puts it that, people think that adopting some of these self-awarenesses, mindful awareness practices will make you feel better. But in fact, it's not, sometimes that's not what happens. It brings up some discomfort, and the real aim is to feel better. If you get the distinction, to be able to feel our feelings better, and some of those feelings might be a little uncomfortable. And so learning how to be with them is part of the challenge of mindful awareness. And that, for people in particular who have experienced adverse childhood experiences or experienced trauma, being open in that way can feel like too much. And so this is a place where compassion and self-care are so important. These practices can be very helpful for people who have experienced trauma and adverse experiences, if it's done with care. And if you maybe pay short visits to those uncomfortable places. And in some cases, even can be helpful to get support from a counselor or a therapist if it becomes overwhelming. But the important thing is to realize that you are managing and you're in control of your experience with any discomfort that you might have, and to approach that with compassion for yourself. And finally, it takes time and effort. So it's a little bit like picking up a violin. You might have a hope that you pick it up the first time and you're going to be able to make beautiful music with it, but the reality is probably going to be different from that. And cultivating self-awareness is a little bit like that, in that seems like it should be easy, but it's not. Often you first pick it up and what happens is very different from what you might intend. But the key practice is to bring what I'm going to talk about as empowering mindsets with you to help you overcome some of those challenges. So I'll share with you a couple of these what I think are empowering mindsets to help deal with some of the challenges of cultivating self-awareness. And the first is compassion, and I mentioned that already. This is not just a nice extra, but can be just incredibly helpful and powerful in opening up the experience for you and getting more out of the practice. And that involves noticing, like if there's something that's uncomfortable, noticing it and responding with a kind and accepting spirit, like you would a friend. And not just notice, but also be moved to take care of the need or the discomfort that comes up. The second empowering mindset that I want to talk about is openness. So here, this is, as I mentioned before, it's about maintaining a receptive presence of mind, really tuning into what is happening as it's happening, and trying to the extent possible to let go of your expectations for the experience. Next is curiosity. And this is just wondering, just inviting in that spirit of curiosity about your own experience. But what is it? And maybe what's beneath the surface? I'm feeling this, but maybe there's something, even deeper there. Maybe if I stay with it, I'll discover something else. So it's maintaining that kind of a spirit of curiosity can be helpful. The next is an observer stance. So this is part of what makes it a part of the difficulty of maintaining and cultivating self-awareness, is in order to not get pulled away, being able to take kind of a wide view of our experience and notice what's happening, so that if we get distracted, we can also notice and then bring our attention.
I have an option to rename, period. I went in and changed.
We have,
period.
can we do mute there? Okay, thanks. And finally, acceptance. And that means that we relax our expectations and judgment and what we think should be happening, and allow into awareness what is actually happening in the present moment. So that's what I came up with. My I'm a big fan of Dan Siegel, and he likes to create acronyms. So this is an acronym that spells out COCO. So I don't know if that would be helpful or not, but these are some of the things that I have found that can be helpful. All right, so that's enough words from me. Now, what I'd like to do is invite you to try a mindfulness exercise with me. So as we settle in, I invite you to notice your attention and try to remember that distractions happen. And if they do, see if you can bring your attention gently back and maybe even call up one or two of those mindsets to help you with your practice. Okay, so I invite you to, this is going to be a sense mindfulness exercise. So I invite you to sit comfortably, undisturbed, just for a couple of minutes. Maybe close your eyes. You're welcome to take yourself off camera for a moment if you'd like to do that. I want to begin with 3 deep breaths, letting go of any tension that you notice on the exhale. Notice the weight of your body on your chair. Feel the places of contact where your hands rest on your legs or the desk, where your feet contact the floor. Let yourself also be aware of the feeling of your clothes, where it touches your skin, the air as it touches your face. Let your awareness be open to the shades of light and dark at your eyelids if you have your eyes closed. Take a few moments to attend to seeing with a relaxed and receptive awareness. Feeling your breath and sensing the space around you. Notice any scents that might be in the air. On an inhalation, invite into awareness any smells that might be present just where you are. Now, let your awareness be open to the sounds around you. Receive the sounds. Notice if they're soft or loud. Take a few moments to listen to the qualities of the sound and the space between the sounds. And now bring awareness to your hands. Feel the sensations there, to the soles of your feet, inside your chest and your head. Invite your awareness to fill your whole body and sense your physical form as a field of changing sensations. And now let your senses be open together. Your body and mind relaxed and receptive. Sense what is present here and now. Notice the presence and the experience of aliveness. And now, with another deep breath in and out, I invite you to bring this practice to a close. And when you're ready, you can come back together as a group. Turn your camera back on if you would like. So let's take a moment here to notice how that went for you. Did you find it challenging to focus your attention? Did you notice if you got distracted? And if you did, were you able to gently bring your attention back to your senses? Were you able to bring any of the other elements of COCO compassion, openness, curiosity, observation, or acceptance to this short practice? So this is just a short exercise in experiencing present moment awareness. Remember that it takes practice to develop, to get good at it. It's like building a muscle. You can't expect miracles your first day at the gym. There's another way of thinking about self-awareness that is also something that you can cultivate. And that is your sense of self in time. And this is the sense of our past. This is looking back and looking forward. So the sense of our identity, the memories, experiences, values that create a steady sense of who you are over time. And it also includes a sense of who we aspire to be. What are we moving toward? What are our goals? And we can grow this aspect of self-awareness too, through practice and through reflection. And you can do this by making time for reflection, either journaling, having conversations with friends or colleagues, or reflecting on questions like this. How have my past experiences shaped who I am as an educator? Or what are my core values as a teacher? Who am I at my best? So I'd like to create a little space for you to reflect on those questions right now with a short journal exercise. So we're going to take just 5 minutes. And if you've got either something to write with, old-fashioned pen and paper style, or just open up a new document. And I invite you to think about this question. I invite you to recall an experience that you have with an educator who had a significant impact on you. Describe your experience with this person. What are the emotions you associate with this experience? What are the ways this experience has shaped who you are today as an educator? And how does that inform who you aspire to be as an educator? And we'll take 5 minutes for this. So we're going to do a breakout room exercise. And in your breakout rooms, you'll have a chance to share your experience with a significant educator. How do they shape you, who you are today, and who you aspire to be as an educator? So we'll put you in groups of about 4 or 5, and you'll have just about 3 minutes to speak. So please try to be mindful of the time. And as listeners, I invite you to see if you can bring some of the qualities of attention, the mindsets that we talked about, compassion, openness, curiosity, acceptance, observation, to your responsive attention to the speaker. So this is kind of advanced listening here that I'm inviting you to try in your breakout rooms. So in your perspective as listeners, how was that for you? Were you able to kind of lean into maybe a little bit more compassion toward the listener, or curiosity, or acceptance? Would anybody like
Member
to
get interrupted, and Leewall is maybe how you say her name. Anyway, she was launching into something that I thought was absolutely fascinating about, she went to all of her schooling was in a different country. So that our American educational system was like, what? So anyway, I don't know if she's hearing, but like, that would be really cool to hear. Yeah. That perspective is always to me very valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Easy to be curious about people who's, anybody's experience, but especially when it's very different from our own. Would anybody else like to comment about what that was like for them?
I would.
Yeah.
I noticed how a lot of the people in my group shared stories about their own personal experience or experience of their loved ones, and how that teacher doing that thing for themselves or for their loved one ended up being a thing that they then incorporated into their practice. So they saw an example of what they wanted, what they needed, and their needs being met, or the needs of their loved ones being met. And then they started doing that same thing that other person was modeling, that teacher was modeling.
Yeah. In a conscious way.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Did anybody else find that in their conversations?
Well, I can share something from our group, room number 8. It was interesting because a couple of roommates, like mates, shared something, and what I heard, both of them like sort of suggested that what the teachers did or the mentors did may not have been pleasant at them, or they didn't make sense to them, or they didn't like it. But then, when later on, when they sort of developed more into that, or went into the depths of that work, they got the value, and they could understand and grasp the value of what they have been giving to them, and they learned from that experience. This was interesting.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think
Okay.
that, oh, do you have something more?
No, thank you for
Yeah.
listening.
I think it's part of the value of engaging in this practice of self-reflection at various different stages of our lives. Sometimes we internalize messages from educators at one point in our life, and then, further down the road, we have different experiences and our perspective has changed, and we look back at that same experience and we learn something different from it. It strikes us differently now, given where we are and how our perspectives have changed over time. So thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else have something that came up for them that they would like to share?
Yeah, I'll say something.
Yeah.
In our group, we talked about how interesting it was to be masked, and then when the masks came off last year, students and vice versa. I know for just the act of listening is how it was enhanced when you could see the person's face, right? So attending to facial expression, how valuable that is to actual the process of listening. So that was an interesting point that was brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that has taught many of us the value of that nonverbal communication. So easy to kind of maybe not pay attention to. And I think cultivating some of these self-awareness practices can help us appreciate and understand not just the way that we, or the words that we're communicating, but how, and how important all that information that's coming from our faces can be to helping us not only understand, but also feel connected to other people. So, thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else who would like to share with the larger group something that you learned in your smaller breakout group? All right. So there's a question here I'm noticing in the chat that says, could you recommend books at the end of the lecture? Yes, I love recommending books, and I will provide Mackenzie with a long list of some of my favorites. And so, yeah, I'm more than happy to share that. We could take some other questions if there's any other questions at this point. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat. Maybe I could get some help keeping an eye on the chat if questions come in.
Bonnie, earlier there was a question about the person that developed the wheel of awareness. Could you name that person again?
Yes, that is Dr. Dan Siegel. I have his book right here. Aware is the name of the book. If you really want to do a very deep dive into the idea and concept and the neuroscience of awareness, that he even goes into quantum physics about all of that. It's very fascinating. And he's written many books. One of the things I appreciate about Dr. Siegel is that he writes not just for other scientists, he writes also for the therapeutic community, psychologists as well, but also for parents. He writes for parents and is trying to apply some of these concepts directly to help some of the most important people who shape the minds of young people, which are parents and also teachers. So highly recommend his work. Anything else? There's a question here about Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence. Yeah, this is all, my sense is that it's coming from the same place. So there's Goleman's work on emotional intelligence, and I think a direct lineage there at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence is Mark Brackett. That's another person whose work I recommend. And he, the book in the last couple of years called Permission to Feel, which is, it's a very good book, very readable. He's very personally shares some of his experiences, and he talks specifically about the program that he has developed, which is the Ruler program, which many of you, if you're involved in social emotional learning, might be familiar with that. So yeah, no, I think that was kind of just an early version, but it's, and the science has just kind of continued to develop over the years. So yeah. Anything else? Oh yeah, someone has had a training with Dr. Brackett. Yeah, he's kind of putting himself out there and doing a fair number of trainings and talks and things. I use my mood meter to help language arts students. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. The mood meter is great. And one of the things I appreciate about Mark Brackett is that he really focuses on developing that rich and nuanced emotion vocabulary, and I think it's the mood meter that he uses this chart that shows, and I encourage you to look that up, the mood meter and the RULER Ruler program. It can really help. And there's even an app for it that I play around with a little bit, where you'll be prompted to identify the emotion that you're feeling, and it's incredibly powerful. It's another one of those things that it's not immediately clear how or why that works, but when you are able to name the emotion that you're feeling, it's like creating these connections in your brain between, this feeling part and the thinking part, and it can help, the expression. This is Dan Siegel's, I believe other people said it too, name it to tame it. That if you're experiencing very powerful emotion, being able to name that emotion, especially with some granularity, can be really helpful, not only in calming the emotion, but also in helping to understand yourself a little bit better. There's a comment here that said, I like the empowering mindset part. Yeah, no, I encourage you to try these practices with students and adapt them, make them your own. There's certainly plenty of work being done. I'm taking a class with folks from the Center for Reaching and Teaching the Whole Child right now, which is another resource that I would recommend. I'll give you all these resources, but later we won't necessarily need to take up so much time right now with that. Okay, so I think I will go ahead and wrap up and remind everyone kind of where we've been this afternoon. We've talked a little bit about different ways of thinking about and approaching self-awareness, what some of the benefits of cultivating self-awareness can be, both health benefits, but also in terms of well-being. We've talked about some of the challenges in cultivating self-awareness. It seems like there's a whole lot going on the outside, but there's actually quite a bit to it, and it can be challenging. And we talked about some empowering mindsets that you can state an intention around, and that can really help you to persevere and to keep with it in these practices so that you can reap some of the benefits. And we gave you a little bit of an opportunity to experience cultivating both in the moment with the sense awareness exercise, and then also this other way of thinking about self-awareness, which is the self, our sense of ourselves in time, or the past, and who project our lives into the future. And so we had a little bit of a chance to do an exercise with that too. And so as I leave you, what I want to invite you to consider as final thoughts is, what do you imagine could be the benefits to you personally and professionally in cultivating this self-awareness practice? So feel free, if you are open to it, to go ahead and share some of your thoughts in the chat.
Bon,
Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I guess we have a hand raised, and I believe that is a question that was asked in the chat as well. So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know what that means.
Oh,
Well, do you want me to say the question?
yes, please. Or if you want, I can just.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the question was like how this, which was great. I mean, this self-awareness and turning inside into, like, back into ourselves can help us, to build. Maybe it's like the answer is in the future sessions, but how does it help us to develop empathy towards others, including our students, in order to get to understand them better from inward, like their inner feelings, their inner, character or whatever needs.
Thank you so much for that question. I'm really glad you brought that up. And yeah, we will have a whole session on empathy, but what I want to say right now is that my belief and my experience is that these social emotional learning skills really do build on one another. And so as you cultivate this capacity to turn that lens inward and to start to develop some familiarity with your own inner thoughts and experiences and feelings, what happens is that people tend to become more in tune with those things in other people as well. So you are more likely to notice and in fact, Dan Siegel again has a theory of mindsight, which he applies both to cultivating that lens inward and recognizing our inner thoughts and feelings and sensations, and that cultivates your capacity to turn that same lens to help you interpret the experience of other people. So to interpret their thoughts and feelings and all of that. So I do think that they're related, and please do stay tuned and you'll hear more about how that is the case and why that is true. But I can also just say from my own experience, I notice so much more than I used to after having done this and cultivated these practices, particularly in the realm of nonverbal communication. And so, yeah, I invite you to give it a try and see what your experience would be.
Thank you very much.
All right. If you have any other closing thoughts, something that you are taking away from this session, do feel free to drop that in the chat. And with that, I will hand things back over to Mackenzie.
Thank you, Bonnie. Feel free to keep adding to the chat. We have a little bit of closing information from PESB. So I think I'll ask Matt to share the slides. And okay, there we go. Thanks, Matt. So I'm going to give you some information about clock hours and some other information that is helpful to have for as we go forward. So a lot of this information and questions you might have can be found in the SEL series FAQ document. Project, would you mind putting that in the chat? Okay, great. So that'll be in the chat in just a second. So you can take a look at that document. It has lots of information and answers a lot of questions you might have. So here is the SEL series overview of all of the sessions that we are holding. So in September, we had a kickoff Zoom presentation with some PGP guidance, and that recording is now available. It is available in the Cell series schedule document. So we'll put that link in the chat as well. And the Cell series schedule document has all of the links you need for recordings as they become available, Zoom registration, and PD enroller registration information. So that document has a lot. So tonight we had our self-awareness session with Bonnie McDaniel, Dr. Bonnie McDaniel, and our next session is in November with self-awareness and consciousness. You can review all of this information in the Cell series schedule document. And I just glanced at my chat and saw that, will I be emailing this information out? Yes, everyone that registered for the Zoom meeting tonight, I will email you this information. Yep, you can go to the next slide.
The microphone is on mute.
Matt, you can go to the next slide. Okay. Tammy, can you hold your question for a second?
I don't even know what I'm doing.
Okay. So there is an opportunity to earn up to 38 clock hours with this Cell series. And how you can do that is you can earn 1 clock hour for the Cell series kickoff session that happened in September by watching the recording of that kickoff and filling out an attestation. And again, all of that information is in the Cell series schedule, all of those links that you need. You'll earn 2 clock hours for tonight. If we end early, that's fine. We will still award you 2 clock hours for tonight. And then you can earn 2 clock hours for each of the other sessions as well. So that adds up to a total of 13, but you can also earn an additional 25 clock hours for free by completing a PGP, a professional growth plan. And I'll give you a little bit more information about professional growth plans in a moment, but it's a great opportunity this year to earn lots of great free clock hours. And then at each session, you'll be given nope, you're good. You can go to the next slide. You'll be given the link to register for a PD enroller. And so for tonight's session, if you haven't already, the PD enroller link is here. We can share, yep, Projecta just shared that in the slide. If you need a claim code, the claim code is on this slide, but I will also email this information out. So you'll need to enroll and then attend. So if you've attended the live training, I will verify your attendance so that you can earn those clock hours. And then, but if you are viewing the recording of this session, you will need to view the recording and then submit the PESB clock hour attestation form. So if you are viewing the recording of this training right now, you will need to submit the attestation form, which is also linked in the Cell series schedule document.
Mackenzie, I think there is a question. The link is for the September session.
Oh, no. Okay.
So,
let me pull it up real quick.
okay.
Sorry about that. I forgot to change it. 1 second.
So we should still register for this session, even though we are attending?
If to get clock hours, you will need to register at PD enroller as well.
Okay.
Yep. So you need to do 2. So you have your Zoom set registration that you did today to get into this meeting. And then to get clock hours, you also have to do the PD enroller.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, if you need help with clock hours, for example, if you don't know how to log into PD enroller, you don't know what e-certification is, or you have general questions about clock hours, look in the SEL series FAQ document, because there is a ton of answers to those types of questions in there. So if you're not sure about what clock hours are or why you might need them, please look in that FAQ document for more information. Okay, so now a little bit about PGPs, or the Professional Growth Plan. So PGPs are, it's a professional growth plan, which is an embedded, self-directed, self-development opportunity. It's a form that you'll fill out. All the information is on PESB's website, and you can earn up to 25 clock hours at no cost by doing one of these professional growth plans. So over the course of this school year, you can complete a PGP, and they must be completed by June 30th of every year. And you'll think about you'll do a needs assessment and select a goal for your personal learning. This isn't about student learning. This is about your growth as an educator. You'll select some goals and align them to a standard, to the standards that you'll select. And then you'll create an action plan. So in this action plan, you'll pick activities to do and submit and have evidence that goes with them. And then at the very end, you'll reflect on your learning. Once you've done everything, you'll review it, have it reviewed by a Washington certified educator, and then you can submit it to your district for clock hours and salary advancement, depending on your school district. So there are lots of different role types that can complete a PGP. Teachers can complete them, administrators, educational staff associates, and paraeducators can also complete PGPs. If you need help completing a PGP, there's lots of information on PESB's PGP website, and it gives you the whole process of what you need to do with some additional information. We also, at the series kickoff, we also gave lots more information about how to complete PGPs. So you can also watch that recording and review those kickoff slides for help as well. If there are any other educators in your building or district that have completed a PGP in the past, you can reach out to them to ask questions and get help since they've already gone through the process. And then the Washington Education Association is also hosting a PGP training, and you can view that on their website. So their next PGP training is on November 8th. So I will send these slides out so you can reference these links that have all this information later. So you will get all this information in your email. Okay, yep, like I said, you can visit PGP's website for more information. So if you go to Current Educators tab, pesb.wa.gov, and click on Current Educators, then you can go to Professional Growth Plans, and it will give you all the information you need to complete PGPs. All right, and then our next session will be on Monday, November 14th at 4:30. And it is all about self-awareness, self-consciousness, diving into authentic self-evaluation and rediscovering my superpower. We will have presenters, Dr. Maurice Aluno
well.
and Suman Hukano.
I'll come help you.
Well, I'm almost.
So this session that we had tonight was also self-awareness. This one's diving a little bit deeper with some different presenters. So feel free to register for this session as well. And hopefully we can get some of the kinks with the Zoom registration worked out by next time.